Ainda este ano, Laura Poitras lança um documentário sobre a saga de Snowden. E Glenn Greenwald acaba de publicar simultaneamente em 25 países o livro Sem Lugar para se Esconder, no qual conta os bastidores das reportagens que ganharam os maiores prêmios de jornalismo este ano.
Most journalists, they have to fight for months in order to have a source that will open up, that will give documents, a good story. And in this case, you had to insist for months for Glenn Greenwald to install an encryption program so he could have the documents. And you almost lost the opportunity of doing the breaking news of a lifetime.
Yeah, I think the reason why I like to tell this story, even though, some people say, oh, it seems embarrassing for you to tell, is because it makes some important points. What the reality of what happened is, he didn't contact me and say, hi, I'm Edward Snowden, I work at the NSA, I have, many thousands of top secret documents I would like to give you, and then I just ignored him. What actually happened was that he was very afraid, in retrospect, for reasons that we now all understand were very valid, that if he were to speak to a journalist without it being very protected through encryption, there was a very good chance that the United States government would know that he was going to do what he did. And so he was very worried and basically unable to tell me anything about what it was that he wanted or what it was that he intended to do. All he was really saying was very vaguely, I have some things I want to talk to you about. And until he told me things about him and what he had, I wasn't really making him a priority. And until I made him a priority, he couldn't really talk to me about what he is. So it really underscores that this surveillance that he has helped bring to light is not just a threat to privacy, and it's not just a threat to democracy, that it all takes place in secret, it's also a threat to journalism. So it worked out in the end. He was very persistent. He went to Laura Poitras, of course, who did have encryption, and then she involved me. But that difficulty, the reason I tell that story is to encourage journalists and everybody to use encryption, but also to show how dangerous of a world it is when the government can know everybody who's talking to everybody else.
If I could follow up on that, I would say one of the most important things for me about that situation is that it's a case study of how encryption is so important but also so difficult to use. Nobody's communications are going to be secure, whether they live in Brazil, whether they live in the United States or anywhere else, unless we all have access to these tools and they're invisible to us. Without you having to install programs, without you having to learn all these things, but it happens by default, without anybody making special steps, because people naturally, we can't be bothered.
Were you frustrated when he didn't install the encryption program?
I think it's fair to say yes. I mean, I tried several times, several ways. But I also expected that was a possibility. I mean, it's a big ask, and it's reasonable. Everybody expects journalists to, have priorities. They're busy people. They've got stories they're working on. And if you're just some guy saying, "Hey, I've got something you need to know, but I need you to do this really complex, difficult thing," it's understandable.
Documentos vazados por Snowden e mostrados pela TV Globo tiveram grande impacto no Brasil.
Were you able to follow those stories from here?
I was, and I was fascinated by them and the reaction to them. It's amazing that in every country in the world, people highly value privacy. Nobody wants to be spied on. We feel the sense of violation. And when we think about it objectively, we go, what were you hoping to find? There's really no explanation, no justification for the U.S. to be spying on Brazilian oil companies. Why does, the American president want to read Dilma Rousseff's emails? What's the benefit? What's the gain? Now, there has been some argument from the president in the United States saying that he was unaware of these programs, and to some extent that may be true. He has also agreed with me that these programs are not helpful, that they don't have any value, that they haven't saved any lives, they haven't promoted the interests of the United States, and for that reason he ended them. He said, no, why are we spying on these people? Just stop, it's not helpful.
Were you able to watch President Dilma's speech at the UN?
I was inspired by that speech. It was incredible because the Brazilian president was the first president, I think, that took a very strong leadership role on saying, we have a right to be left alone, we have a right to speak, we have a right to communicate, we have a right to associate freely without being monitored, without being watched. And these are not civic rights, these are not national rights, these are human rights. The progress that we've seen in Brazil with the passage of bills like Marco Civil are extraordinary, but they're only the beginning. They don't go far enough. We can't just give speeches, we can't just pass national laws, we can't just make small changes. We have to create an international standard through which our rights are respected, they're codified in law, and they're enforced through the standards of our technology.
How do you think that we as individuals and society, as a community, can protect ourselves against this?
So one of the biggest solutions to this is technical. We need governments to invest in education and research in mathematics, in technology, that will allow us to secure communications not just in some city, not just for some service, but for the entire world. And the way we do that is through advances in technology and the standards that are used to secure them, the standards that we all agree to communicate by. Because Brazil could pass the best law in the world for protecting their citizens' privacy, but as soon as a Brazilian citizen's emails leaves the borders of Brazil and goes to another country, that country has the choice of going, oh, do I follow this law, do I not follow this law? Nobody will know. If we enforce our values through technology, that problem is solved.
Every now and then, American press says that you would offer Brazil information in exchange for asylum. Is that an offer on the table?
Absolutely not. I could not be more clear. First off, I don't have any documents to offer. Secondly, even if I did, I would never trade secret information or cooperate with some government in exchange for asylum. Asylum has to be granted on humanitarian grounds. It has to be granted to protect political rights or the right to safety. This whole topic about sort of negotiating for asylum, I think, is improper. If Brazil wants to offer asylum, if they want to stand for human rights, if they want to protect the rights of whistleblowers, I think that's a good thing, and I would certainly encourage and support it, whether it's in my case or the case of anyone. But I would never engage in any kind of sort of deal or quid pro quo exchange.
It's been a year since the first revelation, and very soon it's going to be a year since your asylum here was granted. What's next when it expires?
My asylum does end, I believe, the very beginning of August, and I still do need to receive permanent asylum. And if Brazil and the petition and the efforts there results in the government offering asylum or some other kind of permanent status, I would be more than happy to accept it.
More than 1.2 million people signed the petition asking President Dilma to give you asylum. Would you like to live in Brazil?
I would love to live in Brazil. I think Brazil has a great reputation. They're a growing country. They're rapidly developing, not just economically, but in so many new ways with science and technology and culture. Even their gaming culture, you know, online. Brazilian gamers on the internet are recognized by people around the world. Even their in-jokes, their cliches. Brazil is a country that I would love to go in. I would love to live in Brazil. And you know, if 1.2 million Brazilians would like to invite me, I would definitely welcome their invitation and be happy to accept it. And in fact, I already sent a petition to the Brazilian government requesting asylum. So if they chose to offer it, I would definitely accept.
So you did send the request?
Absolutely, yeah. Back when I was in the airport, I sent requests to countries around the world. Brazil was one of them. It was a formal request.
But the Brazilian diplomacy said they never got a request.
That's news to me. It could be maybe there's some procedure they say wasn't followed. Many countries have said that you have to be in their national territory to apply for asylum. Maybe they've done that. Maybe that's something for people to follow up on.
You know, tens of thousands of NSA's employees, people working for national security, for the spy agencies in the US. Do you feel like you're a divergent?
No, actually, I think the people who work for the NSA, the people who work for all of these different organizations, they're good people trying to do good things in a hard time with a lot of morally gray choices. The problem is not the people at the working level. The problem are not the rank and file employees. The problem are the senior officials who are setting policies, and they're making bad decisions, they're making bad policies, and they're creating unlawful programs that they know can't be defended. So they use secrecy to protect themselves from embarrassment and accountability rather than to protect the nation from any kind of real threat. And that's a critical problem that we need to reform. But I know for a fact there are other employees around the intelligence community in the United States who were deeply concerned and unsettled and troubled by the same programs I was, because anybody who looks at these programs, regardless of whether you work for the NSA or whether you work for NBC, can see that these go too far. There's a line between what is necessary and appropriate and what we're doing simply because we can. And the President himself has said the time in which we do things because we can is over. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should, and I agree with that.
Do you think that the way the NSA operates is really helpful to fight terrorism?
It's not.
And efficient?
It's definitely not efficient, and it's definitely not effective, and you don't have to trust me to say that. The first court in the United States to ever review this program in the open found that these programs had never stopped a single attack or saved a single life in the United States from any kind of imminent terrorist attack. They also said it was Orwellian in its scope and violated the rights of everyone in the country. The President commissioned 2 independent White House investigations with full access to classified information to look at everything the NSA had done with these programs and to see was there any unique value that justified continuing these programs, and they said there was not, and the program should be ended. One of those investigations said the program had no basis in law at all and never should have been begun. And the Congress in the United States, both houses are now saying these programs need to be reformed, they need to be ended, and protections need to be instituted to make sure something like this never happens again. I think that's an incredible statement, an incredible rejection of the fact that these programs are necessary and appropriate for defending terrorism, because if they were, would all 3 branches of the American government be saying we need to end them?
Are you happy?
I am. It's been an incredible challenge. It's been a really tough year. I've worked harder than I think I've ever worked before, and you know, it is hard for me to be separated from my family, to be unable to go home, to be able to participate in my government and my society as fully as I'd like to. But at the same time, I can go to sleep every night and be confident that the choices I made, even when it was really hard, were what I felt were the right choices. And because of that, I can wake up every morning with a sense of satisfaction.